here with us for another great conversation tonight in this 23rd Spiritist week of the Tri-State, which began on Sunday and ends on Sunday. So thanks for all watching us here on YouTube, and thanks for all of our friends in person there at our beloved center, the Spiritist Society of Bridgeport, SER. And thanks to our big friend, Assisi, who accepted our invitation to be speaking for us tonight. Today's Friday, the end of the week, the work week for some of us. So at this time, I invite all of us to close our eyes, to take a deep breath. And as we breathe out, may we leave whatever worries behind us. And at the same time, let's tune our hearts and our minds with our spiritual benefactors, higher spirits, and our Master Jesus, so that we may receive with our heart in a peaceful state all the knowledge and all the feelings and the good energy prepared for us tonight. To begin, we're going to read a message from the book Happy Life. Of course, you cannot solve all of the world's problems. However, you can and must make your contribution. While you cannot put an end to war, you have resources to avert personal disputes. While you cannot feed the starving multitudes, you can offer one person a slice of bread. While you cannot offer health to all the infirm, you can help one sick person. While you cannot avert human tragedies, you can comfort someone in distress. While you cannot mobilize the masses to speed up the changes the world needs, you can change yourself inwardly, ennobling yourself in working for the good and solidarity. Very good. A good reminder that we all can make a difference starting with us. So, following this beautiful passage from our friend and spiritual benefactor, Joanna de Angelis, I invite us all for our initial prayer. And if you want to close your eyes, and let's feel grateful for choosing to be here tonight. And may we elevate our thoughts so that we may receive all the knowledge and the words and instructions from tonight's conversation deep within our hearts. And may that give us the strength, courage, and determination to carry on, despite all the challenges that are going through in the world right now. May we take our cross and may we accept life's challenges as a path for our improvement. Like the message said, give us the strength, higher spirit, our Master Jesus, so that we can do our part on the inside. Thank you for being here with us tonight, wherever we are, online, in our homes, in the center. And please shine a bright light in our friend Assisi, and may his words enlighten us as usual. So be it. And for tonight, as we have already said, we have with us our friend Assisi. A little bit about Dan. Uh, Dan was featured in a Togetherness video series, an interfaith documentary. Also a founding member of the Spirit Institute. You can find him as the host of the Spirit Conversations podcast, and he's part of the board of the California Spirits Association. But more than that, he's a big friend of ours. Thanks very much, Dan, for accepting our invitation. And Jesus bless your talk tonight.
Thank you so very much. I am very glad to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dan. Word is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Congratulations on the 23rd Spiritist Week of the Tri-State. What a wonderful feat to be able to come together once a year for the past 20 so years to celebrate learning and growing. Congratulations to everyone who's making an effort to grow every day through the study and practice of Spiritism and the wonderful teachings and lessons that it brings us. I am super thrilled to be here with you today. I like to start by saying how grateful I am, because one of the gifts that Spiritism has given me in my life that I did not expect was the honor and the opportunity to make wonderful friends in many different parts of this beautiful earth that I would otherwise never would have met were it not for Spiritism, were it not for our Spiritist events. So I am super thrilled to be here and talking to you, and I'm very excited that we also have some friends I can see here on YouTube. Hello, folks that are watching, and I know there are folks watching also at SIR. Please receive my warmest hug in this moment as we have this wonderful opportunity to spend some time together. Our conversation today is about change. I want to save some of our time for a conversation about that, but the topic that we are proposing that we chat about today is the parable of the lost son, and how it can serve as a framework for changing our lives. I love that we just read a beautiful introductory message by the incredible Spirit Joanna De Angelis that talks about change, talks about what is it that we can do. And even if we can't do these great things that we wish we could all of a sudden, there's always a question lingering in the air about what is it that we can do. And so what I'm hoping that we are going to do today is embark on a journey of exploration of a story that has been in the Bible and the Christian Bible for 2,000 years, the parable of the lost son, sometimes called the parable of the prodigal son. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to start by offering some comments on why I find this to be such an interesting topic for our days. And the idea around presenting this topic and sharing that with you today and having some time to interact with each other, hopefully if I don't get too excited, because you know me, sometimes I just keep talking forever. But if I don't get too carried away, and we do have time to chat at the end, and I would love to hear your comments. I want to frame this as an opportunity for us to think about our current times and our current state. Many of us really appreciate the Christian tradition, and many of us are really enamored, in, to say the word, with the Christian Bible, with the Bible and the stories that it brings us 2,000 years from 2,000 years ago. And why do I say that? Because these stories, they are very contemporary for us, or they could be if we only have the eyes to see. They help us think about transformation, because the entire Christian experience is, in my perspective, about personal growth and personal transformation. And the Bible is no different. So the Bible I find to be a wonderful manual with many different tips and wisdom and stories that lead us to think about how we can change ourselves. How can we grow to become better tomorrow than we are today. And I find that a very timely topic because for the past year and a half, 2 years, the world has been changing so drastically and so fast in many different ways, mainly because of our pandemic, our COVID-19 pandemic. So I wonder if we can use this story, the story of the lost son, of the prodigal son, as a framework with which to think about change on a personal level and how that can affect the society that we live in and how that can then that society change as well. And so I was very pleased to hear that beautiful initial message by Joanna G. Angelis because it connects exactly to that idea that there is something we can do, and that is for each one of us to decide what is it that we can actually do. So I hope that you will indulge me, have some patience as we go through the parable, talk a little bit about it, and then look at the symbolism that it can bring to our lives. And at any point in time, if you're following us on the web, please feel free to interact. We'll try to bring your comments and address them to the measure that we can. We might not have answers to all of them, but we'll certainly try to get you some responses. Does that sound like a plan? I hope that sounds like a plan. So why don't we go ahead and start framing a little bit this parable of the lost son? And we know that a parable really is a story with some sort of symbolic meaning. And the parable that we're talking about today, the parable of the prodigal son or the lost son, can actually be found in the Gospel of Luke, one of the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. The other 3 being Matthew, which I call Matt because we're friends by now, Mark, and John. So these 4 people are 4 witnesses to the passage of Christ here, and they give us different narrations. And the parable of the lost son, it's actually found in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. We are going to read a little bit about them and actually read the parable because I think it's important. And we're going to use the New Living Translation. But I say that because it's also important for us to chat a little bit about this parable in context. So chapter 15 of Luke has 2 other parables before the parable of the lost son. And the 2 other parables, you might remember the parable of the lost sheep and another one. All of them have to do about finding something that has been lost. So this is the 3rd story in a row that we find in that chapter about finding something that has been lost, the returning something to where it should be. And clearly, that's a very powerful topic, especially nowadays as we are thinking about returning to the sense of normalcy, returning to the so-called life that we have before. And many of us, in many different ways, are struggling to make sense of this year and a half and how we have gone through it and what life could be like now that we are returning to a sense of more of a common everyday life. And so let's dive into the parable, if that's okay with you, so we can kind of figure it out if there's some wisdom there for us to take about these events, these past year and a half, and our life in general, framed within this perspective. Now, to do this, I'm going to suggest that we actually do something that I generally don't like doing very much, which is I actually want to read these 21 verses thereabouts of the parable with you so that we can have the story. I think we all sort of may have been exposed to the story before, but in this particular case, if that's okay with you, I actually want to take the time and read with you these verses. It takes about a minute and a half so that we have a common context from which we can start drawing and tracing all this symbolism. So bear with me for a second here. And here we go. Let's do this. Okay. So the parable starts like this. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them, his friends, this story. Because remember, there were 2 parables before this one. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his 2 sons. A few days later, This younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. Here we go a little bit more. And when he finally came to his senses, the young son, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, the father ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. And his son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son.' But his father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found.' And so the party began." But you might think, this is where he ends, right? Nope, not yet. There's a little bit more. Check this out. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We're celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I have slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet, when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf?" And his father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." Well, thank you for your patience there as we kind of went through this story again. And it's an interesting story that merits a little bit of our attention. And to make sure that we get the whole story as a narrative, let's use a little bit of a visual aid here, if that's okay with you. So let's kind of imagine what this journey was like for the prodigal son. All right, so here we are. So first, as you remember, when we start our journey, he is working at the farm. And we know that in the farm, we have two sons, a younger one and obviously an older one. The younger one decides that he has had enough and that he actually wants to ask his father for his inheritance. And that's quite surprising, right? A little bit brash, but because which son, who actually asks their father or mother saying, "I want my inheritance now before you even die. I want to enjoy life as it is right now. It's my money." There's a clearly sense of entitlement, right? Because why would you ask for it's your inheritance before your parents have even died? And you can imagine how difficult that is, because in a way you're saying, I don't really care about my parents anymore. I just want what they have given me, and I'm just going to leave them behind. So the younger brother here is a little bit rude. Let's just be honest, right? We're not expecting this kind of behavior. Imagine if your son came to you, if you have a son or a daughter, and they came to you and said, Dad, Mom, don't want to live here anymore. Give me what you're going to give me when you die so that I can go and explore the world. So not exactly a great way to start, right? Your life, saying like you're just going to go into different things. But that's what the younger brother does. He is cocky and brash enough to say that, oh, that's mine. I am entitled, and just give it to me and I'll figure it out what I'm going to do next. And to our surprise, the father actually does that. And in the story, if you paid attention, you see that the father doesn't just give the money to the younger brother. He actually divides his inheritance, his fortune, between the two children. So the older son has also gotten his share. It goes unnoticed, but it's also there. And then what happens after that? Our young protagonist here goes to this distant land. And that is a beautiful symbolism that's important for us to start to pay attention to. So he's going far away from where he started. He's no longer in his farm near people he knows. And he's got a lot of resources. He's got a lot of money. And the story tells us that he really begins to enjoy himself. And he uses his money to please himself in all possible ways. He indulges his senses. He goes into wild living, right? So he's eating at the best restaurants. He is dating all the people that he can possibly date. He is maybe hiring some dates. He is just enjoying himself and just filling himself up with pleasure and experiences that he feels are good. But like everything else, something else happens. Like our lives, things change. He hasn't been doing a great job taking care of his money and his resources, and he runs out of money. And it just so happens that in that distant land, far away from where he started, there is a famine. There is a lack of food. There is a lack of everything. And all of a sudden, he realizes and finds himself lacking food and shelter and everything else. And he then has to figure it out how he's going to go about his life. And it's interesting to note here that at this point in time, he doesn't think about going back home. He just thinks about, how can I get some money to go back to this luxurious life that I'm living in this distant land? Be it because he likes to indulge himself, be it because of pride, whatever it is, he's not thinking about returning home. And so what does he do? He goes looking for a job. He goes looking for a job because he's really hungry. He starts to lack everything else. And he has to find a way of providing for himself. And so as he hits this...
My apologies.
Oh, Siri is talking to me here on my phone. Look at that. She also wants to be part of the conversation. Siri, just hang in there for a second. And so as he is hungry, he decides to look for the job, and he finds a job feeding the pigs. And that is the lowliest of low jobs in a farm at the time, because as you might remember, he's just been enjoying life and he has no meaningful skills. He is unable to get a job doing anything else because he has not really devoted himself to upskilling himself, to learning new things, to learning a trade. He has just been indulging in the pleasures of life. And so he doesn't have any skills that he can really use to make a living. And he has to beg for a favor or for a friend. And as a favor, he gets this job of being a farmhand, but not any farmhand. The farmhand that feeds the pigs, the dirtiest of dirty animals back in the day, the symbolism of the pig, right? Especially within the Jewish tradition of being a dirty animal that you should not really interact with or even eat. And so he doesn't have any skills. He is feeding the pigs who live in dirt and who are clearly unclean. And he realizes while he's doing this that he starts to look at the food that he's giving to the pigs, which is the leftovers of the leftovers. And he wants to eat that food because he's so hungry. So he is craving, and in a way, he's a little bit envious of the food that the pig is eating. And that's when he realizes he has hit rock bottom because, oh my goodness, he wants to eat that food. And he remembers that at home, even the servants that used to work for him had better treatment than the one he was experiencing right then and there. And then he begins to realize that something is off here. This is not really a good place to be in. And he starts to come unto himself. And I love this language, right? As if he was far away from himself. He starts to realize that, hold on a second, these choices that I have made perhaps are not the best one. And I have to figure it out how to go back to when I was happier. And so in coming to himself, he decides that he is going to go back home. And he's going to beg his father to let him not just go back to what he had before, but to be a hired hand, to be a helper in the farm. So he's saying, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to be a servant over there because I don't deserve to be an owner of the farm. And I understand that. I messed up. I just want to work. And workers over there get treated better than workers over here. And so he starts to make the way back. And he goes in through that return to the farm. And here's the important thing to say. And I think that sometimes we forget this. Whenever we go to a distant land, or whenever we go to a place other than the one that we are in or at, we have to make the way back. And that means going the same distance that we came from. There is no shortcut. So if he walked 10 miles to get someplace, he has to walk 10 miles to go back. So the journey is there. The return journey is as long as the way out. So that's a powerful image, because we also learn in this story that the father sees that he is coming back and runs towards him before he reaches the farm. And that's a beautiful moment for us to realize, because the father could only have run towards him in his direction if he knew he was coming. And he could only know that he was coming if the father was constantly looking for his son to come back. And so in there, we begin to have a sense of this beautiful love for this father who has let his son make his own choices, but has also been expecting him to come back and has been looking down the road every single day, hoping that on the horizon, he will see his son making his return. And the son has been walking for a while, so he is dirty, he is hungry. Remember, he was feeding the pigs, he didn't have anything else. His clothes are probably all ripped. He's not in a good place, right? He's like a living zombie, sort of like the kind of that you see on The Walking Dead, the TV series. And he's making his way back. But his father rushes towards him and hugs him. And in that moment, the son tells the father, "Father, I have sinned against you. I have sinned against heavens, and I'm so sorry. I've messed up. Please let me become a servant on your farm. I'm begging you." And the father says, No. You're not going to become a servant. Actually, he asks for two different things, right? He says, bring this guy some sandals and a ring. And the sandals is a very beautiful symbolism here, because hired help generally worked barefoot, but the owners of the house had shoes. So bringing him new sandals, saying, I am giving your feet some rest. I am bringing you back to the status that you had before. And I'm also giving you a ring, which is a sign of a covenant, which is a sign of a connection, a relationship, a commitment to each other, as to remind you that we will always be together. And so in that sense, we have a beautiful moment where we see here in the return that the father actually comes and meets him halfway, so he doesn't have to make the whole way back by himself. Part of the way back is actually made with the father walking beside him. And you know the rest. He gets there. The father has been preparing for a while this calf that has been fattened specially to become, juicier, so they can do a wonderful barbecue, if you will, for a special occasion. And they go into a party and everybody's celebrating that the son has returned. But there's something else happening here as well, right? What else comes into the mix? Well, the older brother realizes his younger brother has come back, and it turns out that he is not very happy. He's not too excited about what's going on over there, is he? And so that's a surprise that we also face. So much so that he actually doesn't go into the party. He says, I'm not going there. And the father also comes to meet him, just like he came to meet out the other son and says, "Hey, your brother has come back, coming in." And the son says, "You have never given even me a goat to party with my friends, and now you're doing the fattened calf to my brother who deserted you, who left us, and who took his money and wasted it all on prostitutes and wild living. I don't get it." But the father, with a lot of love, says that, we have to celebrate. He's come back, and you are always with me, and everything that I have is with you. And so that's also an interesting wrinkle to the story that we also want to talk about and look into. But I hope that by now I have filled your ear with the story and you have a better sense of how the story and the different parts of the story break down, so that we can talk a little bit more about how they can relate to us. Because you might be asking yourself, Dan, so okay, I got the story, but all right, so where do we go from here? Well, let's talk a little bit about the beautiful symbolism that this journey reveals to us, right? So for a second here, for instance, we can think and say that there are different phases to the journey of the prodigal son. And I want to investigate some of these phases with you so that we can see whether there are lessons that we can take for our day-to-day on an individual level, but also on a collective, social level. So, all right, so let's do this. Here we go. Let's try that for a second. So the first lesson that I think that we can start thinking about and pondering is the farm. And I know there's some handwriting there, some writing there on the top of the screen that might be hard for you to see. But the point here is the symbolism of the farm. The farm is that place that we start from, that we begin our journey. And so we ask ourselves, do we recognize the opportunities for growth we have before us? Do we value the places that we have started from? Sometimes we don't really pay attention to the wonderful gifts that we have been given. Sometimes we don't give value to the family that we were born in, and especially now that as Spiritists we understand all the family planning that it takes place on a reincarnatory level for us to find the right circumstances, to be born in a family that will provide us with what we need to go through the lessons that we need to go through. So we take things for granted sometimes, spiritually speaking, just like that brash young son who decides that that life that he had wasn't good enough for him and he wanted more, and that he had a sense of entitlement and believed that that which his father had worked to accumulate and grow and create was his without any of his effort. And so do we have an opportunity to reflect on where we are and how we started our own individual lives? And what are the opportunities that have come to us, or the challenges even, because of that? That's a moment for reflection. And a powerful moment for reflection, too, as we think about this COVID situation that all of us are living. Do we really value the life that we had pre-COVID? Do we understand the opportunities for growth that we had? Do we understand how life was before and how we could learn? That's a great moment for reflection there. So the symbolism of the moment here, and I will start to speed up a little bit so that we have enough time to cover everything, is to realize that we are given a lot of opportunity for growth. And that's important for us to understand, especially as we develop this spiritual thinking that now is beginning to come to us with our Spiritist learning about reincarnation and cause and effect, and know that the challenges that present themselves in our lives are the result of things that we need to go through, atone, amend, learn, grow. So do we recognize those opportunities? Have we had a moment to reflect on where we started and why we started there and what kind of lessons we could take from that? Rhetorical question, people. Rhetorical question. You get to answer that on your own. And the second question that we also want to pose is invite us for a reflection about this distant land. How far away are we from God and our spiritual essence? Because you see, the prodigal son, he leaves his HQ, he leaves his base, right? And in a way, we also make the spiritual journey to leave the spiritual world, to leave our starting place and go explore this physical world. It's part of life. But sometimes we get sidetracked and we end up in this land which is very distant to where we started. And by that I mean we end up in a frame of mind that is very materialistic. And I don't mean to be judgmental here. When I say that, I'm really talking about physicalism, of just thinking that what exists is only that which meets the eye. We only worry about our jobs. We only worry about making our mortgage, taking our kids to school, our relationships, buying a new car. We forget of our spiritual essence. We forget about the importance of divinity and spirituality in our world. And so we also have to ask ourselves, how far away are we from giving importance to the things that matter most, or that should matter most to us in our lives? Our own spiritual essence, our spiritual nature. Do we make time for that in our lives? How far are we from where we want to be when it comes to tending to our own spirituality? Do we practice our spirituality? Do we reserve time for it? It's an important question, because I always joke that it might be possible that we spend more time on this earth thinking and brushing our teeth on a daily basis than considering our own spiritual selves. Because brushing our teeth, we all do for at least 2 minutes at a time. So 4 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, we're brushing our teeth. But do we spend 5 minutes a day thinking about who we are spiritually? That's a tough one. And why not? Right? So how far are we in this distant land? Where are we in this journey? And the third phase that's always interesting for us to consider as well is that of the hunger that presents itself. You see, the hunger that the prodigal son goes through is not just a physical food hunger. It is also a hunger of purpose. And so we might look around in our society today and see that there is this hunger that plagues our heart. What is this hunger? I have never seen so many people who are struggling to make sense of their lives as we see them now. They have sometimes a lot of food, a lot of money, a lot of fame, a lot of beauty, but they are lacking this purpose and this sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. So what is this hunger that is plaguing us, that is attacking us? What kind of hunger do we have in our hearts, and what is this for? And that is an important question, because we can only answer that question if we begin to think about spirituality. Because the things of the physical world will not be enough to fulfill our innermost hunger for connection, for love, for affection, for growth. Because the things in the material world are going to go away. But the emotional things that we achieve, the spiritual things, that they stay with us. And so it's important for us to identify what kind of hunger do we live in. And I wonder if it's also possible for us to look out in our society today and see that there is a larger social hunger for purpose and meaning. Maybe this is the time with the COVID thing where we get to reinvent who we were and what we want to do. Maybe this is a time where we are in this distant land. We've got ourselves to this place where we forgot about what really matters. And now we are having the time to really think about things. Because the pigs are another important symbol. We've been trying to make this happen this way, just accumulating things in the physical world. But this work, this feeding the pigs that we are doing, it doesn't fulfill us, does it? Just chasing after our physical dreams, our materialistic dreams, has not satiated that hunger to the point that we work. And even when we work and we do these things and feed the pigs, we don't have enough for ourselves, for our own hearts and our own souls. So what hunger is this? And why do we keep feeding these pigs? Why these things that we do as a society are not fulfilling us? I would hate for us to have spent 2 years in reflection and experiencing COVID and really rethinking the way we live our lives to go back to just where we were. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make just enough of money feeding the pigs so we can go back to that distant land. But maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe it is time for us to come unto ourselves individually as a society and ask ourselves, When will we go back to our essence? What is it that really matters to us? From a spiritual perspective, what is it that matters to you? What makes you happy? What is it that is actually like a sustaining feeling of fulfillment that you have? When has that happened? Is it when you bought a new car? Is it when you helped someone? Is it when you learned something new? What is it that stays with you and feeds your soul, not on a temporary basis, but on a permanent and ongoing way? So, are we coming to ourselves? Is this the time in our collective history, as we've had 1.5 to 2 years of reflection, to realize that things, that the world that we want to go back to pre-pandemic wasn't as great as it seems right now? Because when we were pre-pandemic, before we started to try to feed the pigs, it was still hungry. It was still hard. So we might be a really missed opportunity if we just try to go back to the lives that we had before without making an effort to reinvent our way, without really thinking about how can we return? How long will it take for us to return to our spiritual essence? How long will it take for us to really contemplate being in full presence of our spiritual selves? How long will it take for us to return home from where we started, that is to say, to realize that we are spiritual beings first? For us, Spiritists, that is a big call. That is an important call as well, because we have had direct proof over these past 160, 170 years that it is possible for us to communicate with the spirits of those who have lived before and are now without a body. We have had direct evidence that that which we are doesn't stop being when our physical body dies. And I say that because it ought to remind us that our primary, main, essential identity is that of a spiritual being. And so, are we returning to that awareness? Because once we do, we begin to think differently about how to live our lives. We begin to think about life and the long term growth and learning, and not just having, but about being. And that's a really important awareness that we are being called to reflect on, and that the parable of the lost son is inviting us to reflect to where we are in the process. And that is an interesting question, because whenever we read this parable, we often think that we are only the prodigal son, that we can only think from that perspective. But what if? What if we could think slightly different, and we could also ask ourselves, who are we in this parable? And that is a fascinating question, because when we think about it for a little bit, we could be more than the prodigal son. And I present to you on this side over here, if you are looking at the screen right now, this beautiful painting by Rembrandt of the prodigal son. And you can see the prodigal son over there kneeling before the father. And if you were able to look at it a little bit closer, I'm going to see if I can make it this bigger here for you. I think you can. You see those two different hands there? Such beautiful symbolism that Rembrandt used in this painting that is currently being housed at the Hermitage Museum in Russia, in St. Petersburg, actually. And so look at the beautiful symbolism, for instance, here of the two hands. One is a sort of a feminine hand on the left side here. I don't know if you can see that. And one is a little bit of more of a masculine hand, right? And as if to say that, yes, we are dealing with a story about men, fathers and sons, but it might very well be about mothers and daughters. It just so happened that that period of history used to be even more chauvinistic than we are today. And so if you're reading this, if you're listening to this, make no mistake. This is not about gender. This is about relationships, whichever relationship we have with ourselves and others. It could very, very well be a mother and daughter relationship. It could very well be a daughter and father relationship, a mother and son relationship, right? So the important piece here is to see this beautiful symbolism. But I like this picture because it also, reminds us of the different witnesses that are seen there. We have different people there in the spiritual world, sort of like looking, but look at that face of the brother. Can you see that? the other brother is not very happy. It's the guy here on the right. He is not very happy. He's a little bit judgmental. And I want to talk a little bit about him because sometimes we forget that the other brother is there too. And he complained as well, didn't he, about the fact that his brother was coming back, to a point that he even talks to his dad and says, and this son of yours, basically he's saying, I am no longer a brother to him. I have let him go. I have kicked him out of my relationships. He has come back and you favor him. And here I have been for all this while, working for you, helping you, and you have never given me anything. And so while on one side we have the younger son who we know was brash and conceited and went into the world, now we have this older brother who's also entitled in a different way. Because remember, friends, he also received part of his inheritance. Because when the father split the inheritance in the beginning, he was fair and gave to both children. So he too got his part. But you see, for him, it wasn't enough just to have his share. He also needed to feel better and greater than his other brother. And then when his other brother was in need, he did not want to help him. Because bringing his other brother back would mean placing them at the same level. For him, that's not what he wanted. He wanted to feel superior to his other brother. It's the only explanation we can arrive at when he refuses to welcome back his other brother. And isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that sometimes we could also be this older brother who doesn't want our brothers and sisters who perhaps have not made the best chances or choices in life to also get a hand up. That who also still feel like we need to feel better than others to be okay with who we are. So there's a lot of wisdom here in this story, because it also leads us to question, what kind of relationship do we have with others? Whether they are in a position that is superior to us socially or spiritually, or inferior to us. What kind of role do we have in helping those who perhaps might be a little bit behind, who may need another hand? Is this the posture that we have? Are we saying now, I'm sorry, you have squandered your resources, I can no longer help you. It was your fault, your problem, go away, you deal with it. Or are we choosing to be more like the Father? The Father who welcomes his son back and had been constantly looking for the son in the horizon, and went towards his younger son on the road when he was able to see him at a distance. So the character of the Father here, we obviously symbolize greater wisdom, spiritual being, perhaps our friend Jesus, or even God if you want to. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a heightened state of spirituality, of consciousness, where there is love impregnating his actions. And so can we also be like that Father in our lives? Can we also go towards those who perhaps have wronged us before and have made choices that have not been the kindest to us? Can we still go back to them and accept them who they are and help them get back? Can we also have tolerance with those that perhaps have not deserted us, but haven't been that kind with others either? Because you see, the Father also goes towards the older brother who didn't want to go into the party. He always goes towards his children, even when they are not at their best. Can we be that symbol in this new society? Can we also go towards those who perhaps are not doing so well? Can we lend a hand? What is it that we can do that helps us get there? And that is the question of the moment. And I think that is the question of the parable as well. Which character do we want to be? And just like the message of Joanna de Angelis that opened our conversation today, we can also ask ourselves, what is it that we do next? What will we do from here on? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter as much where we have been. What matters is, what is it that we are going to choose to do from here henceforth? And that is an important individual question, but also a social question, because we need not feel like we are going to be alone or that we are out there by ourselves. Because we are also reminded by this beautiful story of the lost son or the prodigal son, whichever name you want to give to it, that the father, mother, God, whoever you want to call it, perhaps you might visualize Jesus, our older brother here, would always be with us. And we are ultimately and permanently reminded of that in the last sentences of this beautiful story, when the father says to the older brother, son or daughter, substitute here whichever gender you want to, because it's not about the gender, it's about the spirit. You are always with me. We are always with God, and everything that God has is ours. We have to celebrate this happy day, for your brother or sister was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found. And so let's think about that for a second as we celebrate the Spiritist Week of the Tri-State and think about the third revelation, which we affectionately call Spiritism. We have to celebrate the fact that we are able to be with others and help others because we are beginning to glimpse our spiritual essence. We're beginning to realize that we are not physical bodies that have a spirit. We are a spirit that is temporarily enveloped in a physical body. And that's a subtle distinction, but it's an important one. Because what we are constantly called to do, and especially in this past 2 years, is to think of ourselves not as just creatures of the here and now, but creatures of the forever. As the parable reminds us, we have everything that is God's. God has given everything. That means that we are to inherit the universe. We have everything that we can possibly want and more. We just haven't realized that. We just haven't come to terms yet with the fact that we are going to outlive this physical body. And so will everyone around us. And in the moment when we are so worried and so fearful of perhaps losing our lives in a pandemic or afraid of the economic implications that we may have, let us remind ourselves that nothing that we truly are can be taken away from us. Maybe, yes, we might be afraid of the death of the physical body, but that's not who we are. And so if we remember that we are spiritual beings and everyone that we love and is around us is also a spiritual being, what kind of choices will we make differently? Because here's what I know. I have not stopped loving those who have lost their physical lives. And I guarantee you that they have not stopped loving me either. And so when we think about this, it's a powerful awareness that Spiritism brings us, because it brings us the certainty of the afterlife, of the life after life. And if that is the case, then the bonds of love that we have with each other are permanent and unbreakable. So all of those that you care about, they are not gone. They're just temporarily invisible to you, but they're still there, and you can still feel their love if you let yourself open your heart to it. And more than that, my friends, when we learn through Spiritism of our many journeys through this history of ours, through many different reincarnations, we must also arrive at the conclusion that we have loved many people in previous lives of whom we do not recall right now. But they continue to love us too. And so not only do we have the love of those that we have met in this lifetime, but we also have the love of those, all of those we have met throughout our many incarnations. Fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, all of them continue to love us. We are just temporarily under this illusion that we can now free ourselves from, that we are just this physical body. But the love that has been coming towards us has been tremendous throughout our lives. And it's now time for us to awaken to this reality that as immortal beings, we can't feel this love, and we can also become less anxious about our physical future. We know eventually that we are going to leave this physical body behind. We know eventually we are going to discard it. We know eventually that we are going to use a more temporary word, die physically. But who we are doesn't change. And so, what is it that this certainty brings to us? What is it that the third revelation, what is it that this revelation that Spiritism brings to us, that the life that we have continues in a different way, but continues nevertheless after we die? What does that do to us? How does that change our perspective? It could change it tremendously if we are to step into it, if we are to make space in our hearts for the implications of the certainty that the good spirits have been whispering to our souls for thousands of years, and that has been made more explicit in this past 150 years. Beautiful, beautiful potential implications for all of us. So how can we change our lives? And that's a question that each one of us may continue to ponder and reflect on. And that's why I find the parable of the lost son so interesting, because it gives us a framework. It gives us a story that we can work with to find out where we are in the process and where we might go next and what might happen to us. It gives us a sense of certainty that even if we feel like we are in a distant land, even if we feel like we are hungering for purpose, even if it feels like we are feeding the pigs and we're not making progress and the world is fundamentally unfair, even if we feel all of that right now, we can come back home. And coming back home to the farm means returning to that knowledge that Spiritism makes plain, that we are spiritual beings. And that helps us become a little bit more tolerant. That helps us to become a little bit more settled in our ways, because we know that everything that's physical will pass, but us as spirits will not. And the spiritual message that keeps echoing in our souls must be heeded, must be heard. And this is the time for change. Much like the prodigal son went astray and made its way back, I wonder if it's not also the time in our lives, individually or collective, for us to make our way back to that sense of spirituality. And so that's the invitation that continues to linger in the air. And as we recall the early message again from Joanna de Angelis to ask us, even if we can't do great things, what is it that we can do? What is it? What are the small actions and things that we can do to change our lives in a positive manner and contribute to a better life? And that, I hope, is a message that can continue to reverberate in our minds and find space in our hearts so that we can find our own solutions moving forward and live in a kinder and more humane world for all of us, because we all could help it. So thank you so very much for making the time for me today. Also, keep in touch if you like to. I'm on social media and all different things, and very originally, I always use the same name, Dan Assisi. I would love to hear from you. And if you have comments about our conversation today, I would like to hear them as well. But let's be that lost son no more. And I think that's the lesson for today. And thanks for taking the time for being with me.
Dear friend Daniel, thank you very much for your enlightened words and for the very instructive and loving presentation. So it was really heartfelt. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for making the time.
And I couple of comments, because you mentioned I love the sequence, the map, the journey that you mentioned, all the step 1, 2, 3, right? So just a couple of reflections here that you made me feel. So the first one is to be grateful for what we've got today. Like if I am in point number 1 right now, if I am working in Spiritism, if I have the family that I have, like look around and feel this gratitude for the opportunity that we have. Because just like what happened, right? Yeah, uh, we might want to look externally. I mean, I try to find happiness elsewhere, and I think the parable was a very good lesson to say, hey, this is what can happen if you do that, right? So just as a
Yeah.
small, what do you think?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. I think you're very right. I think that's one of the beautiful things that we have access to when we begin to truly understand our spiritual nature. We ought to be grateful for what we have. And even if our circumstances may not compare well to that of others, right? Because sometimes we all want, oh, I wish I had that life. I wish I was born in that family. But that's not the best for us. The best for us is what we have right now. Because as spiritual beings, we know that we have to grow and learn, and that we have been presented with the challenges that we need to grow. Because if we believe in God, and I'm going to take a stab in the dark here, and it's getting darker over here too, as you can tell.
Finally.
Um, finally, right? If we really believe in God, and I think all of us here do, we know that God would never give us a situation that is beyond our ability to overcome it. So all the challenges we have in our lives are actually, in a roundabout way, when you think about it spiritually, a compliment to us because we can tackle them. And so the biggest problems we have are really the universe telling us, congratulations, you are now at this master level where you can solve all these challenges. So if we can shift that mindset and not think about, oh my God, why me? But instead think about, oh, this is a great learning opportunity here. Then we are going to be able to be grateful even for the things that scare us the most, right? That frightens us the most. And so, absolutely, friend, gratitude is where it's at, right? We should all sport an attitude of gratitude if we can.
No, thank you. And the other one was when you asked which character do we want to be, and again, I will never cease to be amazed by the coincidences that we have in the message that we read in the beginning and the alignment with the conversations. And I think the other point was, if you go back to the map, also doesn't matter where I am today, right?
Mhm.
If we do what Joanna says, we can go back to our home. We can get closer to God. I mean, that's also my other takeaway
Yeah.
that you showed us very clearly today, right? Right in.
I love your wisdom there, friend, because that's absolutely true, right? We can choose to delay ourselves in one of those areas, right? We can resist and say, "I'm not going to move forward," and stay at the distant land. We can, struggle and say, "I'm going to stay here feeding the pigs." And the son does that, right? When he's first faced with the challenge and he loses all his money, he doesn't go home there. He doesn't go from like the distant land back to the working farm. He says, no, 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 I'm going to continue to stay here. I'm going to insist on trying to make things happen in this very physical and selfish world that he's living in, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
nobody helps anybody else. Sounds familiar? Nobody's helping anybody. Everybody else is out for themselves, right? And we insist, like, if I can only be here, if I can only find a way of having all those things that I really want to, then I don't need to consider any interchange. But ultimately, we are forced to come to terms. Whether that happens in one lifetime or many lifetimes, that's up to us. But it will happen. It's a certainty that we are going to return to that awareness. But the choice is ours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very good. It's always a loving invitation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We just have to accept, right? So, uh, thank you, Daniel. So, just before we go to the final prayer, just a few reminders here. Um, we still have two lectures, two conversations over the weekend to end this beautiful 23rd Spiritist week of the Tri-State. And actually, we have a special weekend because we have a bilingual double duty with Adriano Barbo, who is going to be giving the same topic. Tomorrow it will be in Portuguese, called O Espiritismo e a Evolução da Humanidade, and the same topic in English on Sunday, Spiritism and the Evolution of Humanity. Everybody trying to give our friend Adriano a big hug before he returns to Brazil soon. So Please tune with us again over the weekend so we can continue receiving all these blessings and all this beautiful knowledge that touches our hearts. Thank you as well for all the online attendees here on YouTube, and for our dear and beloved family at SER. Feel like a big hug here. And to you, my friend Daniel, thank you again for accepting our invitation. On behalf of the entire family, a big, big hug, virtual hug here to you, and our heartfelt, energy. May Jesus continue to bless you in your own path.
Thank you so very much, friend. And right back at you. It's great to be able to connect even digitally. I'm very grateful that we can do this. So thank you to all the friends, new and old, that are watching or will watch this in the future. And thank you to our friends at SIR and everybody at the Tri-State Spiritist Federation as well. A big hug out to the study group at SIR as well. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. And I hope that we may continue to find our way back home.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite my wife, Silvana, to do our final prayer.
Good night, everyone. I just invite everyone to just stay connected to this so loving energy that brought us together here. And may we all feel the blessings, the connection, and all this good energy that's surrounding us. And may we elevate our hearts to be with Jesus and pray. Dear Master Jesus, we are so grateful for all you have been done for us, for paving the path for everyone, for giving us your teachings, your examples, and for being with us, even though sometimes we don't feel that, but we know you are there for us. May we feel him. May we feel you close to us, holding our hands, inspiring us in a good moments, in a challenging ones too. Please bless us, bless our family, our friends, and bless all beings in this planet. May we all feel your love, your care. May we all be in peace. So be it. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
So be it.
So be it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. And let's tune more for tomorrow.